1985 and the crowds are out of control. Rallying is at its height, but Lancia is losing. It needs to homologate a new car to go with its new signing, Ori Toivonen. It needs four-wheel drive. It needs this, the Delta S4 Stradale.
And there is no doubt on the evidence of this very first stage that we are going to see some very rapid Lancias.
The amazing stories that would unfold over the next year were a mix of the beautiful and the ugly, just like the car. We'll get to them in a moment, but if you'd like to support films like this, then do please consider a subscription to the Hagerty Drivers Club, which comes with benefits like a fabulous magazine and the type of 24/7 roadside assistance that Lancia's rally team would have been proud of. Just click on the link in the description to find out more. Now, where were we? Alpha, Beta, Gamma, yes, that's right, Delta. Chassis number 33 is thought to be one of just 70 or 80 Delta S4 Stradale road cars ever built. And that number should set a few alarm bells ringing, because you see, for Group B homologation purposes, Lancia should have built 200. We can only assume that the FIA officials possibly had a rather boozy lunch that day and were perhaps seeing double. The other thing to say is that this Delta bears almost no relation to that Delta, sharing as it does just the grille, windscreen and rear lights. Because this is a homologation car, it is very similar to the Corsa or competition version, so it has a bespoke space frame chassis like the rear-wheel drive O37 before it. In fact, the S4 was initially known as the O38 when it was being developed. It also has these amazing clamshells front and rear. Even sitting amongst the other incredible creations at Zagato & Co, this looks so dramatic when it's opened up like a Fabergé egg. The clams are polyester resin on the road cars and were a lighter, stronger carbon fibre Kevlar on the rally cars, but the spectacle is the same on both. Stored under the front one is a space saver from a Ferrari 308. And what's hiding under the rear clamshell? Well,
over between the supercharger and the turbocharger, which happens at about 4,000 RPM. This engine is just wild, and it spits flames.
what makes this car so wild is that it has two types of forced induction. So if I come right in under this clamshell like this is just mad, isn't it? We've got, well, more pipe work than the Pompidou Centre in here because it needs an awful lot of cooling in this engine, because we've got turbocharging, which is obviously all the rage at the time because it gave big power, so obviously Audi and Peugeot had gone for that. But Abarth, well, they still like supercharging because that gives the low down response that obviously used it in the O37 before. And this was, remember, an era really before anti-lag. So supercharger takes it up to about 4,000 RPM, gives that low down response and power there, and then the turbocharger takes over for the rest of the way for the really heavy lifting stuff. It's just mad looking at it, and the actual engine in there is pretty small, 1,759cc, and the reason for that is because when you multiply it by 1.4, which is the rules for multiplication for the forced induction, it still keeps it under 2.5 litres overall, which means the whole car could be built to a lighter set of regulations. As a road car, these put out about 250 brake horsepower. But one of the reasons that this particular car is so special is that it has the Potentiata optional pack on it, which gives it a bigger turbocharger and means it puts out about 300 brake horsepower. This was the first production car ever to use twin charging, and I think the lift to 300 bhp in this 1200 kilo car really makes a difference. Yes, it's well down on the monstrous rally car where the power could easily overwhelm grip, and a modern 300 brake horsepower hot hatch would no doubt show it a clean pair of pipes. but as a road car, it's still an event, especially when you get right up in the rev range.
3, 2, 1.
It feels really eager, this. The steering, it does have power steering, a clever pneumatic system, but feels pretty unassisted, certainly when you're up and going. Steering is weighty, but certainly not unmanageable at all. Suspension is double wishbones all round, and then in the rear you've got the twin dampers with the spring in the middle. It supports itself pretty well. It rides obviously lower than I thought. And moving around, we're on Pirelli Cinturato tyres, so it's not a lot of grip from them. Coming to a corner like this, you've got plenty of power to test the tyres and chassis, but because we've got an open diff at the front in this, unlike the rally cars, it does just tend to want to push sort of mid-corner and then on exit as well. We've got the Ferguson viscous coupling in the centre, and then I think it's a Hewland limited slip diff at the rear. Of course, you want to potentially sort of get it turned in on the brakes, but the brakes, being this sort of age of car, perhaps not the strongest, but certainly get it moving around a bit.
Through the quicker corners was definitely where it felt most alive and more malleable, playing with the steering and throttle to keep things balanced. With better brakes to help position that front end, I suspect you could probably get it really up on its toes through the slower stuff as well.
I think the biggest surprise for me with this is actually just how, well, civilised actually it is. Yes, it's noisy in here, but as a road car, this feels really production ready.
I simply hadn't expected an Italian limited editions homologation car from this era to be so, well, ergonomic and accommodating. I thought it would have felt thrown together with its dash derived from an Uno turbo, but it doesn't. Inside more than outside, it somehow all comes together. The luxurious, soft tan Alcantara, the emotive, bright orange of the Veglia dials, the perfectly spaced and positioned pedals. It's a curious but quite beguiling cocktail of competition and comfort.
You could imagine doing a decent road trip in this, I think. These seats as well, so comfortable. They were designed by Zagato, and the frames, in fact, ended up in an Aston after this. This gear shift is really nice and slick and easy to use, which is not something that you can say about a lot of these homologation specials, and that makes such a difference to how easy it is to drive. It's a dogleg 5-speed, but it just moves around the gate so naturally. The lever itself is actually designed on one from a pre-war Lancia Lambda, which I rather like. There's certainly enough rawness in here to remind you that you're not in an ordinary production car. There's all sorts of vibrations and noises, as you can hear. It's kind of to be expected. I love these sliding windows. Proper glass though. It's a fabulous mix of the really raw, but actually the really surprisingly easy to drive up over this top section. Views out over the mountains down towards Snowdonia. Stages down there. Ari Toivonen took this to a maiden victory on its debut in the 1985 RAC Rally.
In fact, it was a 1-2 with Marco Alén second, and Toivonen in his magnificent monobrow would go on to take an arguably even more incredible victory in the Monty at the start of 1986.
Toivonen was leading after the first few stages of the rally, but then disaster struck. On a road section down into Val-les-Bains, a member of the public came hammering round a corner and straight into the side of Toivonen's S4. In his words, bending it like a banana, so that in some directions it was oversteering and in others understeering horribly.
I think everybody doesn't have a banana car.
Quanta ce n'hai qui dentro da mettere?
In after the accident.
Even that wasn't enough to completely strip him of his lead.
but a puncture and then a poor choice of tyres on the sister stage meant that Salonen was leading. Nonetheless, with an ailing car, Toivonen hunted down the Peugeot 205 T16 and took a famous victory.
2 WRC wins from 2 starts showed that this new car was fast. In fact, rumours have always abounded as to just how fast the S4 rally car really was. 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds seems plausible, but other claims may be slightly less so.
You see, legend, myth has it that Henri Toivonen could have set, well, a competitive Formula 1 lap time in his World Rally car in 1986 around various circuits. But the trouble is, that's probably not entirely true.
A stage time that would have put him 6th on the grid at the Portuguese Grand Prix is the incredible story, but the trouble is, there was no Estoril stage in the 1986 Rally Portugal. However, Lancia did do a test at Estoril the week before the rally, and that was just after an F1 test had taken place.
Now the story goes that Henri Toivonen was sent out at the end of that rallycar's test session for a full flying lap of the Estoril circuit. However, the car was, well, uncorked. The boost was turned all the way up, so it's producing probably over 800 brake horsepower, certainly way more than it would ever have had in a rally.
The unverified time that it set is said to have been competitive with those of the F1 cars testing a few weeks earlier.
So you've got a car that's not really quite equivalent to the rally car specification, being competitive with cars that weren't qualifying for the Portuguese Grand Prix. But hey, why should we let the facts get in the way of a really good story?
I mean, they've been sleepy and dangerous, and it's been sort of do or die thing.
Of course, the Portuguese rally that year was the beginning of the end for Group B, after a Ford RS200, driven by local hero Joaquim Santos, ploughed into the insane crowds lining the stage.
Then came Corsica and the terrible, fatal accident for Henri Toivonen, just 29 at the time, and his co-driver Sergio Cresto. They were leading the rally, and nobody really knows why the car left the road and rolled over up in the mountains on Corsica. There are multiple theories, but plenty think that Toivonen didn't actually lose control of the car in the conventional sense. His talent didn't desert him, the car didn't get the better of him. Rather, they were becoming drowsy. Why? Because of the smell of that heady cocktail of fuel that was used in those cars, and which was stored in tanks right under their seats. Whatever the reason, it was an absolute tragedy, and definitely spelt the end for Group B.
It also robbed us of one of the great driving talents in Toivonen. As a result, the S4 will inevitably always be tinged with melancholy. But we have to remember that the S4 did also allow Toivonen to shine. It revealed beyond all doubt his remarkable gift.
Henri Toivonen.
Give it some out here. Wow. Brakes, understandably, not this car's strong point, just because of the age of the technology. But the rest of it. What an incredible car.
Compared to other Group B homologation road cars, I think this has to be, no, not the prettiest, but the most extraordinary. The Audi short wheelbase, for example, was, as the name suggests, a shortened version of an ordinary road car. Ford's RS200 looked amazing, but like the lovely little Peugeot 205 T16, its engine wasn't exactly revolutionary, and like the amazing sounding Metro 6R4, it felt rather agricultural to drive.
This really is the most special, I think.
And yet, although today it's impossible to think of a limited run homologation special not selling out instantly,
In the mid-80s, the Delta S4 Stradales sat around in dealers for years. Why? Well, for one, they were ridiculously expensive at 110 million lira each. Then there was the fact that the rally world moved on almost as soon as the S4 went on sale. Yes, the Lancia World Rally team continued with the S4 after Corsica, with Alain and Biasion nearly beating Peugeot and Kankanen to the championships in '86. But then, it was all change. And with the demise of Group B, all eyes turned to Group A, and the phenomenal success of another Delta. But that's a story for another day.